Hey Eagle fans, it's EaglefanKarl. Welcome to my reaction video for the game against the Atlanta Falcons last Thursday night. Great opening night win. A little delayed in doing this video because I didn't have much of a voice having been there at the game. It's a great experience that night, just had an absolute blast. The Eagles know how to do it. They did it right. They had Brian Dawkins out there, gave me chills when he came out and started pumping the audience up. And then, of course, I got a little choked up when I saw the banner get raised above Lincoln Financial Field. So really, all in all, was a great night and one that I'll remember for a long time, especially when you get to the end of the night and the Eagles, of course, pull out the big win against the Atlanta Falcons, potential playoff team, and potentially could be a tiebreaker as it relates to playoff tiebreakers down the road. So really important win. And it wasn't pretty, but these kind of wins don't have to be pretty. All you have to do is get the W, especially early in the season like this when people are still working some stuff out. I'll talk about the beginning of the season a little later in the video, but all in all, great win and a great night for Eagles fans altogether. But let's go ahead and hand out some studs and duds for the week, starting with the duds as we do with wins, because there aren't as many duds as there are going to be studs in this game. There are three that I have singled out for duds. The number 3 dud is actually going to be a combination of two guys, and that's going to be Mike Wallace and Shelton Gibson, who were absolutely invisible in this game. They're supposedly our two outside starting wide receivers, and our quarterback had more receptions than the two of them combined. So that right there should really make you concerned going forward. Before anyone says anything, I am not one of these people that is going to say that they should go out and get Des Bryant. I think that's a lousy idea, but what I do think, if Alshon's going to be out for any length of time, they may want to consider some sort of stopgap. The person that comes to my mind would be Jordan Matthews, because he has familiarity with the offense, especially if Carson Wentz comes back. They have a rapport. So I think that would make some sense, bringing him back, since he's not under contract with anyone. But all in all, I would stay way clear of Des Bryant. You don't need that hassle. Plus, I don't want to see a cowboy like that playing on our team. So frankly, I am not one of those fans that's going to say we need to bring in Des Bryant. The number 2 dud is going to be my guy. I really like Derek Barnett, but he just came up with some really big penalties in this game, and some of them were just dumb penalties where you're lining up off sides, and it really sort of can kill any sort of defensive momentum, especially in a game like this where it's all about the defense and it's all about field position and that kind of stuff. Those little penalties really add up, and it really sort of they were unnecessary mistakes. It's one thing if an offensive lineman holds because a guy's getting by him and maybe they see if they can get away with it or something like that. It's another thing if a defensive back in the defensive backs, they make a bad pass interference because it's going to prevent an even bigger play. Those kind of things you can sort of overlook, but the mental mistakes like lining up in the neutral zone is just unforgivable, and it's just something that it was a mistake, wasn't needed, and I think it really ended up sort of hurting the team. And for that reason, Derek Barnett, unfortunately, doesn't land on my duds list this week. But of course, my number 1 dud, is there really any question who it was going to be? It's the guy that's not even on the team anymore. That's how bad it was, and that's Trey Sullivan. You just got to know in that situation that you just got to get as far away from the ball as possible so that something like that doesn't happen, where you basically get pulled into the ball, make it a muff punt, and then the Falcons can recover. And I know ultimately we got an interception on that, but then we gave it back on an interception. So those interceptions sort of canceled each other out, and the ball was on our end of the field that whole time. So even though it didn't directly lead to points for the Falcons, it sort of ended up, the field position ended up leading to points for the Falcons. So for all those reasons, I think it really ended up hurting the team. And for that reason, he's my number 1 dud of the week. And unfortunately, he's not going to have a chance to redeem himself because he's not on the team anymore, at least on the active squad. So at this point, it's unfortunate that it happens to a young kid like that, but you've got to learn from your mistakes, and hopefully he does. So with that, let's go ahead and take a look at the good, and specifically the studs of the game. The studs of the game, my number 5, once again, I'm going to stick to sticking to only allowing myself to go with 5. There's probably a couple more I could put on this list, but I'm just going to stick with 5. My number 5 is going to be Nelson Aguilar, and that's because he did it all. He caught the ball, he ran with the ball, he passed the ball. So, I mean, he did a little bit of everything. Now, his stats weren't overwhelming. I mean, 8 catches for 33 yards isn't anything to really write home about. But at the end of the day, he was the one guy that was making plays and was moving the ball down the field. So you've got to give him some credit for that. And like I said, he was really doing it all. And if you look purely at statistical, stuff in terms of quarterback ratings, he actually had the best passer rating of the 3 quarterbacks in the game, him, Matt Ryan, and Nick Foles. Nelson Aguilar actually had the best quarterback rating of the 3 of them because he was 1 for 1 and didn't throw any picks, which you can't say for the other 2 guys, and neither of the other 2 guys had touchdown passes. So Nelson Aguilar, in theory, had the best night as a quarterback. So he did a little bit of everything, and for that reason, Nelson Aguilar is going to be my number 5 stud of the game. My number 4 stud of the game, though, is sort of going to go right in line with that. You'll notice I've got the shirt on for the Philly special. I wore that specifically for this video because of the play call that Doug Peterson, who's going to be my number 4 stud, makes in this situation. He really, I think, it's a ballsy call to go ahead and do something like that again, but it sort of set up perfectly. The offense was sort of in a funk. The crowd was sort of, it really wasn't in it. And as soon as that play happens, the crowd went nuts. I don't know how much that came across really on the TV if you were watching it, but the crowd went absolutely crazy when they ran that play. It really sort of energized everyone. I think it energized the offense, ends up leading to them getting the touchdown. And all in all, I think it was a play that was desperately needed. Doug Peterson has the guts to call it in that situation, knowing that everyone knows what we did last year in the Super Bowl. And obviously, it was a variation of it. It wasn't the exact play. In fact, if anything, it was the exact play that the Patriots had run in the Super Bowl against us. In fact, Doug even admitted after the game that it was. But it sort of set up perfectly again, that once again, that would sort of be the spark that would really get the team going. And it was a gutsy call, because if it doesn't work, everyone's killing him, saying, really, you're going to try and go back to that again. And it really would have, I think, backfired. But I think he recognized his offense needed a spark. He needed to get the crowd back in the game. And that was the perfect way to do it. And it was the perfect time to call that play. My number 3 stud of the game, though, is going to be the guy that ultimately won the game for us on offense, and that's Jay Ajayi. He's the guy that punched the ball in twice and got the 2-point conversion. So, of the 18 points, he's responsible for 14 of them. So really, you've got to give a lot of credit to Jay Ajayi for really being really that workhorse back. The reason Doug Peterson actually isn't a little higher on my list is because of some of the coaching decisions he made that I really questioned. Number 1, not using Jay Ajayi more earlier in the game. And the other was a stupid boneheaded challenge that I think he made, trying to wipe out a 3-yard gain, which is shades of old Doug, where you're challenging a play that makes no sense. So I would have liked to have seen Ajayi get used more, if anything. But when he was called upon, he delivered. And ultimately, of course, he scores the 2 touchdowns that end up being the difference of the game. So for that reason, Jay Ajayi is my number 3 stud of the game. But of course, in a game like this, my top 2 studs are going to be defensive players. And for number 2, I'm going to go ahead and make it Fletcher Cox, because I think Fletcher Cox really was sort of setting a tone the whole game. He showed why he's one of the best defensive tackles in the game. Really sort of, there's a lot of guys on that defensive line that make things happen, but it all is centered around Fletcher Cox and what the offensive line is trying to do to stop him, and he's still making plays. So Fletcher Cox, once again, has a great game. I think really sort of sets the tone in this one and ends up becoming a huge difference maker on defense. But my number 1 stud of the game is going to be the guy who makes the big play at the end of the game, and I think he had a solid game throughout, and that's Ronald Darby. Ronald Darby was asked to do a lot in this game. They don't necessarily play specific cornerback against specific receivers, so he wasn't lined up against Julio Jones the whole game. But when he was defending Julio Jones, he was doing a good job at it, and he was making play after play in that situation. The defense was going to allow Julio to get his yards, which was obvious if you look at the stat sheet at the end of the game. But when it came to the red zone, they were not going to let them beat him in the end zone. But of course, the big stop, though, at the end, Ronald Darby makes the big stop. making sure that Julio Jones lands out of bounds for that last catch so that there was no chance he was going to be able to come down with the touchdown there. And once again, great scheme by the defense. And Jim Schwartz is a guy I really wanted to put on my studs list, but he doesn't quite make it. But I wanted to signal out, two of his stars on defense for the top two studs of this game. And Ronald Darby, by making the big play at the end, he's the guy that gets the #1 stud of the week for me. So what were your observations for week 1? Did you have anything specifically you thought? Were there any studs and duds from the Eagles game that you thought that I missed? Leave your comments below. I'll go ahead and leave my prediction video for the Buccaneers. I'll get that up this weekend for the Buccaneers game on Sunday. Until then, fly Eagles fly.